Who doesn't like a good heist story, such as Baby Driver or maybe the Ocean series? There's a crew, there's a plan, they execute the plan, they get the money or whatever they're looking for, and then they escape. It's high adrenaline, it's fun to watch, and frankly, there are so many movies that have heist elements or that are solely about a heist unfolding. And so I got interested in heists, real life heists, and my research led me to a particular heist that happened not so long ago and that may be the biggest heist in modern history. This happened in 2019. This is the story of the Dresden Green Vault heist, where an estimated 1 billion euros worth of jewelry were stolen. On the 25th of November, in the city of Dresden, which is a city in East Germany, at 4:55 a.m., a fire broke out on the Augustus Bridge. Following the fire, the entire neighborhood went dark. The lights were shut off. The neighborhood included the Dresden Castle, which houses the Green Vault. In the cover of darkness, two masked men climbed through the first floor window leading into the Green Vault. CCTV footage shows the men holding flashlights and going through these rooms. These rooms contained all sorts of jewels, gold, pearls, but they ignored all of those as they had a very specific objective in mind: the jewel room. As soon as they reached it, they took out axes and started banging on the safety glass in front of the priceless main jewels of the collections. They broke the glass very easily in a matter of seconds and took out bags and started stuffing the jewels into the bags. They stole a 62-carat diamond, the Saxon white, and stole items such as a scabbard, which was filled with diamonds. All of these items were the main items of the collection, and so were priceless. However, one item was missing from the collection that day: the Dresden Green Diamond. The thieves just ignored this and instead just stuffed as many jewels as they could into the bags. Before exiting, they used a fire extinguisher to cover their tracks, deleting all sorts of evidence which could have been used later on. Two guards were actually on duty and looked at the entire theft unfold in front of their eyes on CCTV footage. They didn't intervene, they were unarmed, and the policy was to call police, which of course they did. The police arrived at 5:04 a.m., which is a full 9 minutes after the heist started. However, when they got there, their thieves were long gone. And just like that, 1 billion euros worth of jewelry were snatched, stolen in just 9 minutes. The value, though, wasn't just monetary. We can't just forget the fact that these are historical pieces. They hold significant cultural value. And let's not forget that this is a vault. How is a vault so easily penetrated and completely violated? This left everyone humiliated. For context, to show you how crazy this feat was, the Green Vault is actually a museum. It's one of the oldest museums in the whole world, created in 1723, and is also one of the largest EU collections of jewelry. So how is it possible that just with 9 minutes, some thieves came in, took the most precious sets, and got out without police catching them? So first of all is something that we already mentioned. It's the policy that the guards had. The policy was to not confront any thieves that would come in and to call the police. However, they did call the police, but just a tad too slowly. And the policy itself, well, questionable. Another one is that a system designed to scan the outer walls had failed that day, mysteriously enough. But maybe the main point which made this whole heist possible, and where I can draw a direct parallel with a heist movie, because this seems just fictional, is the mastermind plan that the thieves had. The thieves were simply ultra prepared, just like you would see in a movie. Apparently, they got access to vault plans, which would make, organizing a heist all that much easier. You know exactly what to find and where. They also visited the castle itself 2 nights before the heist. They climbed over the outer wall, took a hydraulic cutting machine and started cutting the metal grid on the window on the first floor, because of course these windows were protected. After cutting the grid, instead of removing it, they just taped it back so that nobody would notice. How nobody saw them climb over the wall and start cutting with a machine that you would think would make a lot of noise is beyond me. However, they didn't get caught then. One night before the heist, a few of them visited the insides of the vault and posed themselves as tourists, had an audio guide, and were looking very interested in the jewelry. They looked at the glass. They used the opportunity to look at where the angles for the cameras were and the layout to get a feel for the place. Maybe one of the two most genius things that they did was on the night of the heist itself. The fire that started on the bridge, remember? That was actually a power box that they had set on flames. A power box transmits electricity to an entire neighborhood, so if you break it, the neighborhood loses power. And that's exactly what happened. This, shut off all the lights in the neighborhood, that dimmed the cameras. It also cut a few security alarms, and it made the whole thing a lot easier to do. Another stroke of genius was the fire extinguisher thing they did. They just took a fire extinguisher after they were done grabbing the jewels and just sprayed the whole room. Apparently that destroys DNA. I didn't know this, but that's just making things a lot harder for police. They knew exactly what they did and exactly how to do it. After getting in, you have to somehow get out. And so for that as well, they had an amazing plan. The last phase was the getaway. They took a getaway car, which was an Audi A6 sedan, and drove to the nearest highway, which was only a few minutes away, so the location was ideal. They abandoned the Audi in an underground parking lot and set it on fire. They then took a Mercedes disguised as a taxi to drive all the way to Berlin. With this heist, the thieves honestly completely outplayed the authorities, but they wouldn't stop there, as later on, there would be an even bigger outplay happening. For now though, the thieves had a problem. Indeed, during my research, I found out that jewelry heists, only 50% of the job is actually stealing the jewelry. The other 50% is trying to sell them. You can't just sell off stolen jewelry at an auction. People would recognize it because these are very famous pieces and you would get caught. You would essentially have to sell them to the black market, usually by breaking up the diamonds, which would bring down the value, but that's better than nothing. Another problem was that the police were catching on. Despite them not being able to catch the thieves on the night of the heist itself, the investigation that was ongoing at the time pointed all fingers to Berlin, to organized crime, and specifically to the Ramos clan. I did a bit of background research on the Ramos clan, and I didn't believe my eyes. They are absolutely massive. Apparently, they have 500 family members. Family gatherings must be insane. I don't understand where you would even do that, in a park somewhere. They are native to southern Turkey and Lebanon, and they moved to Germany back in the 1980s. The police raided several apartments linked to the family, using over 1,500 officers, so this mission was absolutely massive and shut down parts of Berlin. The police arrested 3 family members, aged from 24 to 29, and at least one of the people arrested were involved in a previous heist, the 2017 Big Maple Leaf heist. The Big Maple Leaf is a solid gold coin which is a whopping 100 kilos heavy, and to steal it apparently, and I would love to see this, they used a wheelbarrow and a skateboard to do it. And the coin is still missing to this day, and so the police knew the suspects, they knew exactly who they were dealing with and what they were capable of. Now that the suspects were finally caught, the prosecutors could go ahead, and it was in 2021 that they charged 6 men for organized robbery and arson. However, the exact same clues which led the investigation to those suspects wasn't strong enough to hold up in court, despite evidence such as a bit of DNA left behind on the crime scene despite the thieves' efforts, and the actual retracing of who bought the getaway car. That was all circumstantial evidence, and in court, it simply wasn't strong enough. However, everything would change in late 2022, when one of the lawyers, hired by the suspects, invited investigators over for a meeting. The investigators went and were invited into a large conference room, which had a large table in the middle. On that table were 31 pieces of jewelry, and yes, you guessed it, those were the ones stolen. Not everything, but a large part of it. The lawyers had a deal to propose. One of the suspects would confess everything, give the jewelry on that table back to the authorities, reveal the location for several more, in return for a much lighter sentence. The prosecutors would swallow the bait, hook, line, and sinker, and accepted. I can just picture the lawyers holding their fingers crossed behind their backs, waiting for the prosecutors to accept, and they did. The jewels on the table were given to the authorities, and the trial continued. And the testimonies given by the suspects weren't as prosecutors were waiting for it to be like. They were waiting for clear-cut answers and a detailed plan on how they did the heist. Instead, all of the suspects were evasive, they told these very contradictory stories, and it all didn't make sense. Prosecutors were hoodwinked, because the deal with the devil was made and the agreement was binding. The suspects were honoring their side, just not as well as the prosecutors would have hoped. Because of all this scheming, the prosecutors didn't get a clear 100% confession. In addition, the items already returned as part of the deal, which were on the table in the conference room, were badly damaged. Some had water damage, and most of them were wiped down with this weird chemical in apparent attempt to remove any sort of evidence. Another thing was that as soon as the police went to the location given out by the suspects where they were expecting to find more jewelry, dive teams went into the water and just looked around for many days and couldn't find anything, except a few old rusty bicycles. The rest of the trial was just a mess. Prosecutors were mad because they didn't get a clear confession, and they were talking to the judge saying, hey, we had a deal, they're not honoring the deal. The judge would simply, raise his shoulders and say, well, they are saying something. Yes, it's maybe not 100% of what you were expecting, but hey, you literally made this deal. And in the end, the sentencing came, and they were sentenced to just 4 to 6 years in prison. And this was the final trick. Not only did the thieves get away with actually stealing the jewelry, when caught and sentenced, they got away with a much, much lighter sentence that they actually should have gotten. And let's not forget that in the middle of all of this, the most valuable items are still missing to this day, such as the Saxon White. Had the Dresden Green Diamond, the crown jewel of the set, been at the museum on the night of the heist, I'm sure it would be missing to this day. Now, people were very conflicted at the end of this whole ordeal. On one side, you had people that were happy that, hey, at least justice was served. Yes, the sentences were light, but at least, hey, we got back most of the items. We can fix them up, they're in a bit of a rough shape, but at least they're not sold off in small pieces on the black market. On the other side, people are more angry. They point at the museum, they blame the museum for having bad security, they point at the judicial system, and they blame them for ever allowing a deal like this to be made and not honored. I tend to agree with the second group more. I think this sets a very worrying precedent, and if I put myself in the shoes of a thief for a second, I just rub my hands together at this conclusion and think, perfect, I just have to steal something of incredible cultural value, make a deal with authorities, get a few years behind bars, sure, but when I get out, as I didn't give everything back, I will just enjoy the spoils of my conquest. And after a few years, I just might do it again. For now, we just have to sit back and wait. We'll have to see what happens when they get out. Will they strike again? Will they steal another gold coin with a skateboard, or do something as audacious as they did in Dresden? Only the future can tell. Thank you for watching the video. I sincerely hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it. These stories simply fascinate me, and I hope to see you for the next one. So don't hesitate to subscribe.